Thank you so much for the kind invitation. It's an honor to be here as a keynote speaker in front of you, and especially in such an important topic. I have been privileged by my life and career to be positioned in between regulatory frameworks, politics, technologies, science, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And over the last 30 years, also being advising governments, I can recognize the reactionary, not proactive activities in number of policy-making environments. So one of the bridges we would like very much always to build is a bridge between a scientific proof and the political decision-making environment. And it doesn't work always. It doesn't work always, and therefore there is a need of a boldness also in the space of entrepreneurship to take a step further and to recognize the challenges but also the opportunities. Among the opportunities, what I have seen in the Rhetoric is a lot to do with regulatory failures. Regulatory failures which are even more difficult to handle compared to the market failures where certain services don't fit with the current conditions. However, the regulatory conditions may sometimes even be more worth. I had in my life an opportunity to be part of the former US President Bill Clinton's speech at MIT when he was just about to leave the office. At his speech, he came out with a very short statement saying that here you at MIT, you are dealing with something which you are trying to apply into practice, transform the scientific knowledge into a practice, and that will be grabbed by the most bold entrepreneurs within the next 10 years into the companies, services, products, but the gap between your work and delivery to the market is 10 years. And then only when those products and services are on the market, it comes maybe even 1 decade later into the awareness of the United States Congress. What the hell is happening? What is that technology we are facing? What are the regulatory frameworks we need? And they start regulating. So the gap is 2 decades between science, regulatory framework, and policy making. And sometimes it feels that the politics are extremely comparable to another very good innovation like Teflon, because no problem sticks to them, even if it's scientifically proved. So what I'm trying to do here is to cover a couple of aspects which have been laying down the grounds over a long time period for us, and which make difference between rhetoric of climate neutrality and green technologies compared to the actual reality we can harness right now. Just to take a brief look to the back in our history, this is an interpretation of the Kondratiev waves, which was brought into a broader economic environment and economic theory by Peter Schumpeter, understanding how we are building on the knowledge. Throughout the human history, the materials don't fall from the sky, they exist here. Only thing we have been gaining over the last 100,000 years or so is acquiring knowledge, and knowledge acquisition is a very short or very long-term process. It takes generations and generations to accumulate, and we have just over the last maybe 50, 100 years, learned how to transfer the knowledge from generation to generation in a better format, and have also formed a kind of scientific theory framework, how to capture something which we call a new knowledge and say that this is a science-driven process. Most of that process has made a huge impact. The first wave of impacts is about how we transform material. But the most challenging part has been always how we transfer energy, which has been wave after wave, new technology after new technology, making a true impact and maybe really making reality the fact what our moderator said, that planet Earth slowly and slowly recognizes the fact that maybe the human species are not the best fit for the environment. However, the latest wave we are witnessing right now has a number of distinct features compared to the earlier waves. And that is information and communication technologies, which we could say is a kind of square where you have information input, information output, information storage, information processing, and in the same time also you have a number of distinct features around it. We are learning to deal with a digital format more and more. We are having a multiple abilities to acquire the information, transform it into a digital format, and also to export it into a number of different other formats. Just another small example of the knowledge acquisition is a famous graph on aluminium production. And we know that the preconditions for the aluminium production, the most found metal in the planet Earth, is electricity, electrolysis process, which was not there before the beginning of 19th century in industrial use. And only thing that has been added is not an aluminium in the core of the planet Earth, but the new knowledge on how to produce it, how to reuse it, how to process it. And we see also certain shapes reflected by an industrial shifts which have been creating a demand. Throughout that history, there have been very little impact on political and regulatory frameworks around that process. But there are a number of other processes which we are reacting right now faster. And this is an account of a processing power we are having. We can say that the processing power in our hands started to evolve and to develop only somewhere around 2007, 2009. So it's a fairly new phenomena. Maybe we can say it's around maximum 15 years old phenomena. And throughout that period, we recognized that the core applications of information and communication technologies are expanding and including more and more sectors than we imagined. The original idea was that information and communication technologies can impact and benefit communication technologies, making them digital. So it became one holistic environment. Then we recognized that it could be very big impact on molecular biology and genetics, also building a digital twin of the most smallest systems we know, the cores around us. However, it started to expand and expand into financial services, into transport and logistics services, and furthermore, and we recognize that it has true impact on, first of all, on the efficiency gains, but also on scaling up your business, making the markets global, making you accessible to all your customers, and building you as a service provider. There is one very concrete and small example. John Deere is known for a huge production of the agricultural machinery. And as any other company, they are also thinking how to make it digital, how to make their work digital. And they have become a platform company, which is a confusion for many people working in the sector of agriculture, which means eventually that they are remotely observed, monitored, and controlled devices, which can be serviced in advance, also recognize the failures in advance. However, you are building with John Deere type of activities a locked-in systems where the interoperability between the different environments is difficult. Similar impact has been on information technology on building a closed system of monopolies in healthcare technologies, where Philips or Siemens or General Electrics are building verticals which don't speak to each other, neither with national healthcare systems. So it has a number of benefits on making systems more efficient, but it also includes an ability to build platforms which are closed. And this is something we are only starting to recognize right now. The battle against the platforms, the battle against the closed systems, and also the true cost of digital technologies, but also the opportunities related to digital technologies are something we are right now only starting to learn. And when we are thinking back to the Bill Clinton, it takes 2 decades for every new feature to be recognized and understood by regulatory framework, policymakers, and start to think whether we should accelerate that, whether we should stop that particular thing. It takes still more time than we can imagine. Next to the processing power growth, we have another gap raising, which no longer is about who has access to technology. Out of 5 billion people using internet on a regular basis, last billion have never touched keyboard or mouse, and they probably never will. Their internet environment looks very different to those who have been growing up with desktop computers and keyboards and mouse. And it's pretty obvious also that the services created for those people, for those environments, are very different compared to what we have used to. So we have on top of each other number of different digital generations also, which started from the computer installed software, moving now to the apps and cloud-based applications, moving further and further to different other phenomena where we don't even know where the data is acquired to combine and put together a particular service which delivers a car next to your door or make sure that your taxi is arriving in 2 minutes. The information explosion includes not only the differences in volumes, variety, velocities, but the most important part is that we are having less and less, or let's say not less and less, but the growth of our capacity to make and give a meaning to that information is growing way slower than the amount of information around us. And it means in the same time that we have a concentration of analytical capabilities that belong mostly to those platforms who have the capacity to invest into analytics. And quite often they keep the analytical environment into the closed loops. For the service, if I am imagining that my brain MRI picture will be analyzed by the machine learning algorithm, which is faster and more knowledgeable than the doctor in hand in my hospital, but it includes me sharing my data with other patient data, but the result I'm getting back is faster and with a higher accuracy. I'm willing to share it, but this is also feeding at the same time closed system platforms where, for example, Microsoft Health care services are building up virtually a monopoly around certain areas, which will be a black box for us, and also meaning that the regulators don't understand any longer where is a service coming from, where is the data moving to, and what is a true cost, benefit, and regulational needs for that particular service. The gap for analytics is increasing every day. And this is why a scientific community around the world is working more and more on how to build an open and interoperable analytical tools for that data we have already in hand. The reflections on the broader policy frameworks include actions. But sometimes we may say that actions are too late and too little. We have right now going on a digital decade in European Union. And there are two keywords, green and digital, for the broader European environment. If we translate green and digital into a man years, we may need to develop the engineering and scientific capacity to take us to the next layer, next level, or the cash available, then we see that it is not so big priority. Things like 1 billion or 10 billion may sound super big sums of money. But if we are thinking that German government just aside for any other business, a few weeks ago decided that they will pay for the CO2 emissions for the German industry, and they will just cash their sins for 30 billion, we can see that there is a difference, that we are trying our best to put the money into a green digital development, but on the other side, there are much bigger financial capabilities to finance the business to continue in the same way as they always used to, and not to care about the true impact. The digital decade is focusing on 4 areas which are also described as a compass. Skills, and we recognize that out of the 500 million jobs in European employment market, we are missing 20 million digital competent engineers. It's quite a lot, actually. 20 million people by 2030 throughout the higher education systems. This is not an easy task. It needs also to address the reskilling, which I think most of the universities are recognizing now. It includes a curriculum redevelopment, and it requires quite a lot of activities to achieve the goal of 20 million new digital engineers in 2030. Education system is not something you can switch on and off like an electricity. It takes a time. And we know new curriculum, if you start to develop it today, first people go to employment market, maybe in 5, 7, 10 years time, because the curriculum development transferred into a jobs in the market is a long time process. So optimistic goal, and even sometimes over-optimistic goal. Second layer, infrastructures. It's expected to have 1 gigabit connection everywhere in Europe. Mostly expected outcome is through 5G networks. It's also a parallel universe because in many cases governments expect to gain from spectrum licensing a revenue for the state budget. And on the other hand, they expect also to deliver more and more services by telecom operators for the smaller price. So it's in a sense, it's a conflict, and we are not convinced at the moment that this is a goal that could be achieved in any means, or whether this is something which needs to be delivered. Yes, we understand that closed environments, for example, industrial environments or machinery or production environments, may have already a big benefits from the super fast wireless connection like 5G is providing. But we don't see the true benefit or the business opportunity of that in whatever remote area except for the faster streaming services. So it is something which we are trying to overstimulate by not recognizing the true cost of 1 gigabit everywhere, the environmental impact of 1 gigabit everywhere, and the market need for 1 gigabit everywhere. It rather needs to be as needed basis. On business side, the transformation, digital transformation of businesses is known for a number of cases, and one of those cases is that they don't want to deal unless they are forced to, in many cases. 75% of European businesses to harness digital technologies by 2030 is a goal, on the other hand, too low. Only 75% of the companies to be digitally competent, it's too little. The government expectations is to provide 100% of their services digitally by 2030. And that means that the lowest common denominator will be the one to follow. Most of the countries which have introduced by now digital government services and also starting to experience with cross-border services are in difficult situation because the latecomers are spoiling the security and also the resilience of the digital government systems by, for example, bringing in different approaches to the data sharing, security, and also digital identity related matters. So this is something which is driving us. We can recognize there is a political rhetoric to make us more digital and build up our digital capabilities to be supported by the governments, by the European Commission, and to be embraced by all the sectors, including also the goals for carbon neutrality. However, it's only a small fraction compared to the real economy and also the small fraction compared to what is happening on right now in the field of just paying to the businesses to continue their business models as they have. Digital twin, and I will stop very briefly on that, is something which is really interestingly emerging technologies. We have learned from the microbiology or digital microbiology, digital physics, digital chemistry to take a bolder step and start building a digital twins of many spaces, not only architectural spaces and urban spaces, but making a digital twin of planet Earth. For the useful cases, we see that also topics which will be discussed today, the urban mobility includes much better opportunities to test, try, and to build alternatives via digital twins of city traffic, for example, instead of putting the stop sign somewhere and seeing how people react, how creative are they, and where do they find the new ways to go through. So digital twins are really something which is building up very strongly, and digital twins are really interactive models, and interaction is something which is first time built into a real physical world and digital world's components. Number of companies are building really valuable cases also. One example, 1970s was one of the era of 1970s was one of the biggest hydroelectric dams building decade in United States. More than 12,000 of those hydroelectric dams with a life expectancy of 50 years were deployed. And if we make a simple math, it means that their life expectancy is just about to be over. The best way to monitor the different risk-related aspects of that very critical infrastructure are not by taking your engineering team down to the ground, but to look to the digital twin of the same critical infrastructure, whether it is a harbor, whether it is a airport, whether it's a bridge, whether it's a railway, or whether it's a hydroelectrical dam. And accuracy of those digital twins, and reaction time is much faster compared to any other process we can observe so far. So it's a good example of the same act created by digital twin, where the red dots are indicating shifts in a landscape movement which are critical to the hydroelectric dam existence and is highlighting the potential risks with accuracy of 5 centimeters and with a time delay of maximum 24 hours. So you can really quickly observe instead of having your team down. So this is one of those examples where we try to build up the ability to analyze. And that is a most underutilized resource so far, because the data I'm talking about is freely accessible, and this is European Space Agency projects related to Copernicus and Sentinel satellites, which feed us live free data, and we are not capable of using or reusing that. One more small lament I would like to make is about the true cost of digital before getting into the understanding what is the green technologies present market space. This year, Netflix, with the help of their sustainability officers and associated scientists, published the true cost of streaming, and that is one small step to recognize what will the digital cost for us if we really want it to be sustainable and be climate neutral. With a current CO2 market costs, and we know it's a market failure, because actually the true cost of carbon capturing is much higher than the present cost. But even with the present cost, if Netflix would like really to handle its environmental footprint, they need to pay roughly 20% out of their profit a green tax. So we are already having some indicators which are showing us scientific proof of what would be the potential impact on making also digital environmentally neutral, if it's at all possible, with the current rates of the growth. So we are seeing that there are willingness and interest in environmentally responsible digital companies also to address their business models and not just make their bits greener, but to have a full life cycle related analysis. And that is the most difficult part we are witnessing right now, the recognition of that awareness. Let's make another comparison, and that's even worse. Netflix is a profitable company. If we take TikTok has to pay, in order to sustain the 750 million users they have, which are also uploading, downloading, streaming, and sharing the data, they need to pay roughly around half of their revenues to manage their environmental footprint. So we have some sort of understanding that there are services which won't sustain at all. Well, if you are paying half of your revenues to manage your environmental footprint, this is not a sustainable business model. At least for planet Earth, it's not a sustainable business model. So you need to find different ways how to address your works. And roughly we would say, everything in digital world, if we would like it to be managed environmentally friendly way, would cost twice as much as right now. And those companies acting in the market space should be at least 20% level of environmental tax out of their profit, or 7% at least out of their revenue, to manage and mitigate what they are doing, even with their best intentions. When I'm about to conclude my presentation right now. I'm just highlighting one small thing which is called a map of the carbon neutrality technologies. Number of things will be also discussed here today. It's addressing 3 different ecosystems, most impactful agri-food, but also terrestrial ecosystems and marine ecosystems. And parallel to that, focusing on how to capture the current carbon levels, how to work with new energy production, and how to save energy. The most immediate impact is not in new technologies, unfortunately, but it's in saving. It's closing, restructuring, and saving, not expecting those technologies which are on the horizon to work with us. It's roughly around, just to summarize, it's roughly around 50 verticals of the technologies scientists and entrepreneurs are working globally towards a carbon neutrality. And at the moment, none of them can be sustained sustainably, economically sustainably in current market conditions, which is a strong message. Even if we have high expectations and hope around the positive impact of those technologies, the market conditions at the present are not able to sustain or give them opportunity to continue their business as, for example, paper industry or car industry or any food or agri industry currently does. So this is unfortunate conclusion of my presentation today. However, we need also to recognize and make sure that the rhetorics of the carbon neutrality and green technologies meets the reality and deliverables, and we need to do much, much more compared to what we have done so far in order really to make sure that we are starting to make things slowly and slowly more tolerable for planet Earth, and it's not the process for the century we have still to deal with, but much less time. So it takes a lot of effort. Thank you so much, and my floor is back to Johannes.
Thank you very much, Linnar. I won't let you leave the stage because we still have some time for questions. And I have a few. I hope the audience has also taken notes and wants to ask a few questions. Now, you began your keynote by highlighting regulatory failures. Could you name a few, I don't know, most significant from the past few years that you just remember? I can give you a hand.
Well, you can give me a hand. Yeah, let's debate about that.
Let's debate about that. Yeah, because, well, for instance, and this is a debatable question actually. The European Parliament effectively abolished Apple's Lightning standard a few days ago by demanding that USB-C is the new standard for devices such as this one. This has a lightning charger and a cable to connect it with. Now, is this a decision that is good for consumers, good for planet Earth, or is it a decision that actually slows down innovation? Because Apple might have a few more new standards that are more efficient than USB-C coming up.
Well, I was thinking that you are building up something kind of more deeper, because in my honest opinion, it doesn't matter at all. Planet Earth doesn't care, technology sector doesn't care. This is what we may call a ritual war dance, which does not end with any casualties.
Why is that so? I have a huge sports bag full of cables that are...
And you will continue, because there will be wireless chargers and all kinds of different standards all around. However, instead of making sure that Apple is following the European data protection standards and also making sure that the way how they process their data is transparent, they are focusing on charging infrastructure and standards. So we have a big thing on the table. And
We're dealing with cosmetics.
we are dealing with the cosmetics in the time of nuclear war, yes.
Harsh.
Yeah. But in my opinion, I would need to highlight one thing. In the times of innovation, where we have all kinds of different opportunities in the financial markets, only thing that European Commission came out with is a payment service directive. And payment service directive wanted to ensure that we have a transparent pricing for the transactions in the Eurozone within a week time. Come on, it's time for real-time payments which are processed free of charge. And this was, for me at least, few years ago, a directive which said that don't worry, keep yourself in the Ice Age, keep yourself in the Stone Age, we don't rush you into a digital age.
Knowledge management, a complex issue, as you said. Now, how do you capture new knowledge and transfer knowledge not only from generation to generation, but also apply new knowledge into practice?
We have a fake promise from technology. Well, it's not really fake because industrial robots, if they are deployed properly, and for example, German industry is deploying more than 1 million industrial robots in upcoming 2-3 years' time. The cost has declined, and they don't belong to trade unions. As you might be aware, they don't get sick, they don't take summer vacation, they don't care what is the weather outside, what time of the year. They don't get COVID. Well, they get maybe computer viruses or industrial.
Sounds like it will really piss off the French.
Not only French, but also Germans nowadays. But the most important part is that if the average industrial robot was able to perform or outperform the functions of roughly 3 people working in the field, it's currently able to outperform 8 people on the field. So we may say, in one hand, that German industry is employing 8 million new people worth on the employment market, but it means in the same time that it's taking them off. But the trick with industrial robots is that if you have taught one robot how to do a certain function, they all know it. Just with the next software upgrade, they're all capable of delivering the same quality output. And this is something which is, I would say, a fake promise because it's a very narrow functions we are capable of transferring from digital system to digital system. However, there are areas where we are still in the times when from one human being to another human being, the knowledge transfer takes as long as it has always taken. We are not able to hack our brain with the next pill and make us immediately a helicopter pilot.
Connecting people, that's what Nokia promised, right?
It's,
a USB cable to our brains. Anyway, yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I could continue this wonderful conversation with Linnar for the next few hours, but that would be unfair because you couldn't ask your questions then, right? So could you please raise your hand if you have a question? We have a question from Mike there in the back of the hall. Can we approach him with a microphone, please?
Yeah, thank you very much for your excellent overview. And actually, I have 2 questions, if I may.
Yep.
So the first one is coming from the first part of your presentation, and it's addressing the fact what you said that it takes approximately 20 years from the 20 years span from the beginning of the new technology emerge of the new technology until all the regulatory and other stuff are finalized. And the question is that can you provide any good example about the exception where this time span has been shorter? That would be the first aspect what I wanted to hear. And simultaneously, can you bring out what were the key factors why it was shorter, and what kind of opportunities does it provide for Estonia and Estonian society? And the second question is about, can you also point out from your perspective, what is the most green digital technology grown up here in Estonia, in the country of unicorns, startups, and also not forgetting the traditional companies who are also aiming to improve and make their production more efficient and so on. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. So difficult questions. And if I'm trying to start from the second one, the most digital Estonian unicorn or startup company or initiative, one needs to understand where we are strong in building and scaling companies. We are strong not in the area of electronic engineering or electronic manufacturing related engineering. We are good at software engineering, and software engineering mostly dedicated to a business-to-business services, not consumer services, but business-to-business services. So most of the Estonian unicorns, big success stories, address a failure in the business-to-business relation, which could be replaced with a digital tool. And I would highlight maybe one company. And that one company is Veriff, which makes a remote certification and authentication for people without a digital identity, which is really a time-consuming exercise otherwise, energy-consuming exercise, and transport logistic footprint for the usual authentication services without digital identity has been hugely carbon inclusive. This is just one example of the companies, and I don't want at all to make any harm to other companies. The first question was even further interesting. I know that from the regulatory perspective, a number of governments have been thinking about a term called sandbox regulation. Sandboxing means that you have some sort of new emerging trend, something may be promising. There are lobby groups maybe around the government explaining that, well, if you allow us to experience here and you will witness our experience, we will guarantee that there will be more and more investments coming into that sandbox. There will be more and more talents coming into that sandbox environment, and it is an economic success. So far, with a Bitcoin, with the financial sandboxes, we have not seen any evidence which has been working for the growth. However, we have seen a very quick sandbox regulations or regulatory reactions when we are talking about fear. So it's, well, I'm not getting into a Freudian environment, but usually it's either you want sex or you are afraid to die, and if you are afraid to die, you react much faster than if you want to become a rich, successful one. So a good example of the very quick reaction was actually a pan-European Corona certificate, which was very quickly adopted. And once again, making QR code, which is actually having a web link to a public database. It's not a very big scientific breakthrough. It's not a big IT thing to say. But most important is that it started to function and to work within the regulatory framework where most of the countries did not have in place the national civic records in digital format, neither national health records. So it was a very quick breakthrough, and it proved that if we fear something, if we are afraid, then we can react quickly.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid we have run out of time, but if there's a very short question, we're going to take it. But please be brief.
Maybe not a real question, but a remark. In my understanding, e-government, the Estonian e-government is a better example, because the state regulation were before the technology was really implemented. What do you think about this?
It's a remark according to the what?
The first question. The regulation of implementing of using e-government was at the beginning of the year.
I can agree to a certain degree, because I have been also part of the process, and I need to say that Estonian e-government is in that case exception, because it has been evolved and it continues to evolve without regulation. We don't have, well, we have some broader regulations, but the fact that email, regular email from me to my local municipality without digital signature or anything, just email to somebody, is considered an act of communication, is something which most of the governments around the world don't understand. So Estonian e-governance system is lots built on the small steps which are interacting and building trust. And that trust is not delivered and guaranteed by strong digital signature, which has so many bits of asymmetric encryption, but it's built on the trust which you have gained over the experience of interacting as a business to tax department, which is responding to a regular email with an honest opinion of tax department. And this is something which is really unregulated, but it's norms and principles which are more important in Estonian case than rules and regulations. So it's norms and principles. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linnar. Ladies and gentlemen, an applause.